Welcome to the PranaTech podcast.
Welcome to the show, Nick Capman from the FDA Group. And, our podcast is about three things it's about growth, entrepreneurship, and technology. And I think Nick embodies those three aspects in a lot of ways. And I'm very grateful to have him on the show today. And, he brings a lot of experience from the MedTech, med devices, pharmaceutical, biologics perspective. And, he has a lot of experience with building teams and really growing companies and really, achieving patient safety and efficacy, right? So I'll let Nick kind of introduce himself and we can go from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. My name is Nicholas Capman. I am the president and CEO of the FDA Group, simply stated.
Great, great. So how did you get started with this company? Like, why did you even do this? Like what was the purpose and like, how did you kind of like get into the industry and like, how did you grow your company to where it is right now? Because it is a big company from my perspective, but maybe you can touch upon that.
Yeah. Well, how did I get into it? Very unusual story. I actually went to college to be a high school history teacher. And when I graduated, the state of Massachusetts was going through budget cuts. So the state was laying off teachers, not hiring. So the closest place I could find a job was in South Carolina. And I had told my grandmother, I said, "Hey, Grammy, I think I found a job. It's in South Carolina." And she said, "Oh, you can't leave." And I said, "I can't?" And she said, "Of course not." And I said, "Okay." So that 7-second conversation changed the whole trajectory of my life. So my first job out of college was actually selling phone service door to door. And the company that had employed me had hired all recent college graduates. So the talk in the office was get 2 years sales experience under your belt. Then you can go apply for pharmaceutical sales positions, selling pills to doctors, and that's where the money's at. So as a naive college graduate, I said, sounds good. Got my 2 years, started applying for jobs. But instead of getting hired by a pharmaceutical company, I ended up getting hired by a multinational pharmaceutical engineering firm that was owned by Novo Nordisk. And I was placed as the head of North American business development at the age of 23. To which some people say, wow, that's really impressive. To which I respond, you should be less impressed by me and more repulsed by the person that thought it was a good idea to make a 23-year-old head of North American business development. So needless to say, I did what most 23-year-olds would do. I made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of lessons. While I was there, I decided to get my MBA, and I had a professor that said he had started his first business, which was a bagel shop, at the age of 26. And I said, well, I'm 26, so I have to start a company. So there was a sliver of the business that I was working at that was compliance consulting. And I said, I think I can do that. So I created the FDA Group, ended leaving that company for a couple of reasons. First, now there was a conflict of interest. Secondly, they were going through a merger and there was somebody else that did my job and they were obviously better than me. So I ended up getting hired by a company that sold enterprise-wide software to medical device companies to help them with UDR requirements. And I used to run the FDA Group out of my car in the parking lot during my lunch breaks. And I did that for about 4 years. And the company kept doubling and tripling every year until eventually I kind of realized I should probably stop everything else I'm doing and just focus on the FDA Group. So fast forward to today, we've been recognized by Inc. magazine as being one of the fastest growing companies in America 4 years in a row. We're headquartered in Massachusetts, so the Boston Business Journal recognized us as being one of the top 50 fastest growing companies in Massachusetts 2 years in a row. And actually, the first year we won, we were ranked number 3 in the state. So those are obviously, great pieces of recognition. But beyond that, I think I'm more proud of our A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, our Great Place to Work certification, and our 4.5 out of 5-star rating on Glassdoor.com.
That's amazing. Wow, I think it's inspirational. For me at least, I'm also on the consulting side of, FDA regulatory strategy, quality assurance, quality development in terms of, how do we get to market. So what type of companies do you work with, in terms of your business, can you touch upon that?
Yeah, so our focus is in the pharmaceutical, biologic, and medical device companies. Um, we also do a bit of work with dietary supplements and compounding pharmacies, but that's a smaller chunk of our overall revenue. And then we focus on US buyers. So while we do work internationally, more often than not, it comes out of the US making the or establishing the purchase order. And we have consultants across all 48 contiguous states as well as 63 countries. So we are able to do work internationally, but as I like to say, if everything's important, nothing's important. So you really have to, decide who is your best client, your most reliable prospect, and focus on them. And that's kind of the center of the target. And then obviously you can sell outside of that, but that's really where we focus.
Got it, got it. No, it's very interesting to know. So, talk about your book, right? The passionate workforce. So I'm gonna go back to your initial, um, statements about, growing your company, growing the team, and like, you talk a lot about culture in your book, right? Nick gets culture, right? And it's very important to me as well. Culture actually defines any company in a sense, right? People want to come to work every single day, feel like they don't want to make it transactional, but they want to make it like a place where they can feel happy, right? Feel like they're doing something that is progressing humanity in a certain sense, right? Talk about your book, and I'm curious.
Um, well, I'll start with your point on culture. Every company has a culture, so it's up to leaders and managers to decide if they're going to allow the culture to be created on its own, or if they're going to be intentional about creating the culture that they want. Um, Culture is something that has been talked about for quite some time, so it's not new. But it is a little bit ambiguous. So what I attempted to do, I think successfully in the book, is just come up with a very easy to follow recipe so that you're able to be intentional about your culture and hopefully get your team to where it needs to be, where you can essentially create and maintain maximum employee engagement. So the perspective that I bring is I look at organizations and the culture of the organizations as being on a spectrum. So or let's use a workforce. So let's say there's a team, okay? Um, on one end of the spectrum, you have passionate people, and on the other end, you have resentful people. And so myself and you, Amit, we've both been passionate at some point or another. And we know how we feel and how we behave when we're passionate. We show up on time, care about the quality of our work, we're innovative and creative, we're helpful, we do the extras, we're positive impact, and it's contagious, right? Also, you and I have been resentful at some point. Same person, different behaviors. We didn't show up on time. We didn't care about the quality of our work. We weren't innovative and creative. We weren't helpful. We could have even been destructive and badmouth the company. So, my belief is if you can create a passionate mindset within your workforce and maintain that, you can expect maximum output from them just by virtue of us recognizing that when you're in a passionate mind state, you behave differently. So the way that I went about this is I created 15 pillars and an assessment tool. The assessment tool follows the same methodology as an NPS rating score. So if you're 9 and above, you're where you need to be. I would call that a passionate leader. If you're between 7 and 9, you're an adequate leader, and so you're doing good, but there's room for improvement. And if you're below 7, I would say that you're an inadequate leader, and there's a decent amount of work that needs to be done.
I see. No, it's definitely a great way to kind of I would say evaluate leadership and understanding how to improve yourself, right? Every day, for me at least, trying to get 1% better, right? Every day, 1% better. Uh, Out of 365 days, that's exponential, right? So I guess from your book, how has that impacted your company though, in terms of the people you hire, the people you have grown with you? How do they feel about um, your culture? How do they feel about how you kind of operate?
Yeah, so those are kind of two different questions. So the book had no impact on the company because we were already implementing the methodology. So to that extent, it really didn't have any impact on the company.
Okay.
But the methodology itself, I would say, is successful, right? Our turnover is extremely low. And the thing that I like to kind of go back to because I have no control over it is Glassdoor.com. Anybody can go there and post, and people do. We've got a couple ones. We've got people that were unhappy and they decided to voice their opinion. And I think every company is going to have that, right? So we're all human. We're all not perfect. Um, but if you're doing the right things and you're measuring them, then you actually have something that you can rely on in terms of a methodology, and you can increase the likelihood that the sentiment within the organization is fostering a passionate mindset. So I would say the methodology has proven successful, and that is one of the reasons that I decided to write the book and market it. And it sounds like it's making an impact because it was recognized as being a #1 Amazon bestseller.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. That was gonna be my next statement. So that's very cool. Honestly, it's one of these things where I think a lot of younger entrepreneurs kind of need to understand human psychology, right? It's not about for me at least, and then maybe you can touch upon this. It's not about engineering. It's not about biomedical engineering. It's not about any type of engineering, AI, whatever it is. You could be the best of the best of the best, but you have to understand people to actually grow. Is that correct or no?
I don't want to remove the importance of the technical skill set and things outside of culture. So I think culture is, one piece toward a successful business, right? There's more that goes into it, but maybe an analogy would be, it's really important that I have, you know, success in my workplace in order to be happy. Yes, that's true. But you also need friendships, romantic relationships, spirituality, health, right? So that there is more that goes into it. So my book is, well, let me take a step back. So I think there's two types of books. Um, there's transformational books, and then there's books where you get nuggets. Transformational books are books that you can't read on the treadmill or while you're driving. You need to sit, you need to focus, you need to take notes, you need to take actions. A couple books that jump to mind are Gino Wickman's Traction and Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. That's a transformational book. Then there are the books where you can read it and or listen to it on the treadmill in your car, standing in line at the post office or whatever the case may be. Um, those are books where it's a little bit easier reading, but you can get something out of it pretty quick and you can implement it fast. So that is the category I put my book in. If you're a failing business, I don't want someone to believe that my book is going to save their failing business. It's not a transformational book. My book is more like Jim Collins' Good to Great, which is if you're a good company and then you read my book, I think that you will become great, humbly speaking.
Got it. Got it. No, that makes perfect sense, and I appreciate your honesty about that. And The transparency is very important, right? And let's talk about transparency in our industry, right? In terms of how we interact with the FDA. I have an obsession with the pre-submission process, and you tell me from your experience, how you utilized it in terms of it's a weapon, right? And it's a weapon that people, in terms of startups, companies should utilize. Talk about the pre-sub process and what your experience with the pre-sub process is. Transparency.
Uh, Pre-submission process?
Yes.
Okay. And when you're talking about our experience with pre-submissions, what exactly would you be looking for me to share?
Well, I would say, what is the purpose of a pre-sub? A lot of startups come to me, right, and say, how do we get to market? Well, a pre-sub
Mhm.
process is actually very powerful in a way
Yeah.
where it's like you can get insights from the FDA. You can
Right.
get insights from people where, we are regulatory experts, quote unquote. But the point is that, you're getting, the information from the horse's mouth, right? In a sense,
Mm.
it's non-binding. It is informal, but the point is that you can ask these questions during this process and get a lot of information to get to pathway for commercialization.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of pre-submission processes. I don't think they're required all the time, but I tend to say most of the time they are. It kind of depends. They're optional. You don't have to pay the FDA. But there's a couple things I like about it. Number one is you find out exactly what the expectations are. So you don't under or over deliver. And so I really like that, and over deliver in the sense that you're doing more work than needs to be done, which is wasteful in terms of time and money. But also the pre-submission is captured in meeting minutes, so it's almost like an insurance policy. So if you submit your application and then it gets challenged by somebody at FDA and they cite something that was agreed upon to in the pre-sub process, you can actually say, well, actually, I'd like to bring this to your attention. I came and had a pre-submission meeting and I was told that this would be acceptable. So those are kind of the two reasons that I'm a fan of pre-submission meetings.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think, the way I look at it is it's risk mitigation, right? In terms of like your product. You don't want to waste time and money on things you don't need, or maybe you do need it, right? Maybe you do need one of these testing facilities to do something, biocomp, EMC, electrical safety, whatever it may be, right? But you don't know until you know, right? We can give you the advice that you need to know, but you need to understand that there is a different process that the FDA goes about, where I would say that their input matters in the whole process. Do you agree or not?
Absolutely. 100%.
So it's one of these things where I love promoting the pre-sub process. Like you said, it is a free process, and but its presentation is key though in these meetings, right? Who's presenting, how are you framing the questions, right? The questions are key. And what I tell my clients or the people that work around me is that it's more of an art than a science, right? These questions. If you ask open-ended questions, you will get open-ended answers. Is
Huh.
that your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is that FDA will say yes and no. So your question should be really designed for yes and no responses.
Right, exactly. So it's one of these things where it has to be very succinct and also I would say to the point, like closed-ended questions. And I think that's where the expertise matters, obviously, right? Because if you've done it multiple times and you have a sense of how to really approach these questions, you will get the best insights because of those questions. That's the whole point of the precept, right?
Right. Also, you're speaking with the FDA, and it's important that you are well prepared and represented when you go to that meeting because the FDA is almost like a boss that you're trying to get hired by. And that's the analogy I like to use. So even though I'm speaking to the boss and asking him what he or she, what do you expect when I come in for my interview, you're already being evaluated. And if you come off as not knowing what you're talking about, you're going to create concerns. And concerns can lead to requests for additional information, which costs money and takes time. So as much as I'm a supporter of the pre-sub meeting, it's not a place, in my opinion, where you can go unprepared and expect for a long-term beneficial outcome. Because when you come back to the FDA, they will remember who you are, and so you could actually end up shooting yourself in the foot. So, but if you get the right people, it really shouldn't be a concern for somebody to go in front of the FDA. With that said, you have to go prepared and with the correct representation, or I think you could create some discomfort with the people that you're speaking to at FDA, and I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But from your experience, like how through the pre-sub process, is there a relationship you're developing with the FDA for a future submission? So if I want to, let's say I have company A with Nick Capman, and we're in this pre-sub meeting. Is it important to kind of present yourself with that 1 hour meeting, saying, "Hey, this is who we are. This is what we want to do. This is my face." Right? You are on a Zoom call or whatever it may be, a teleconference call. And like, does that matter? Present yourself.
Well, I think it matters always when you're presenting yourself because you don't know, right? I think that kind of implies, or it connects with just general life, right?
Yeah.
If I walk into an office building and treat the secretary with a level of disrespect, who's watching that? Who's seeing that? If I, sit next to somebody on an airplane and I'm rude, and they find out who I am, and then there's 6 degrees of separation, who's going to find out about that? And how will it be reported on? So I think just as a practical way of going about life, personally and professionally, you need to represent yourself in the best possible light because you don't know who else is going to see that.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely resonates in a lot of ways. But yeah, I would say let's have a take-home message for the crowd. And people who are younger folks in terms of entrepreneurs trying to start their own businesses, trying to really get into the med tech, med device environment. What would you tell them? Like where to start? Where to obviously there's no destination as we know, but the point is how do you start? Like what is the first step that you would take if you were to go from ground zero?
And when you say going from ground zero, do you mean moving into leadership and management, or are you talking about getting into our industry?
Well, I would say starting a company, a
Starting a
consultancy,
company?
startup, anything, just in
Okay.
terms of just like, how do you even get into place? Like, what would you recommend these folks?
Okay, so I don't use a lot of cliches, and I'll stick with that. So my two recommendations for somebody that's starting a company is get your MBA and implement EOS. EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. We use it, and it has helped us immensely. Like I said, I think it's important to get your MBA, not because you have to be a subject matter expert in all aspects of business, but you do need to understand. I would also recommend that once you start your business, you get involved in a CEO peer advisory group. I'm a member of Vistage, but there's others. There's YPO, Young Presidents Organization, and EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. So try those different ones out, see which one fits for you. And never stop learning, because I think great leaders live in a constant state of being comfortably uncomfortable. Comfortable in the sense that they have control and they understand what's going on, but uncomfortable in the sense that there is something right now, and this applies to everyone. There's something I, Nicholas Capman, am not doing right now that if I was doing it, I would be more profitable and more successful. But I don't know what it is yet. So I'm a detective. That's my job. But once I find that thing out, so let's say it's AI, something simple as a note taker. Okay, now I'm being more productive. Okay, that's great. Let me add that into my repertoire, but it doesn't stop. Okay, now what's the next thing? What's that next thing I need to discover? So constantly be learning, be extremely curious. And if you're looking to start a business, I highly recommend getting your MBA, joining a peer advisory group, and implementing EOS.
Yeah, great message, and I appreciate you being on the show, and I am very grateful for your time, and thank you.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
Bye, Nick.
Take care.